Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have many things to discuss, and we have Kevin Allen here, but we will start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So with, I would say a little more than a month to go for pitchers and catchers to report, there is still no negotiations scheduled for Major League Baseball and the BPA. And so, again, we've seen this before. I said June 15th is like a fictitious date, Kev, because I remember in 81, that's around the date that they started, but they probably reported earlier for spring training, whatever they did before that. But right now we hear nothing, but the big talk is still the Hall of Fame. And there are a lot of younger writers going out of their way now to figure out a way to get Clemens and Bonds into the Hall of Fame, even though they are known steroid users. And again, I'm not going to get into the whole thing of it. Well, what I find interesting is, like, they're looking for these two based on the fact of awards that they have won. And again, I'm just going to go back to that Cy Young that Clemens won in Toronto. I thought it was fishy then, but I didn't know anything about steroids. I wasn't thinking about that, but I was just like, wow, this guy almost couldn't pitch when he left Boston. And now all of a sudden he's like 21-8 for the Blue Jays and wins a Cy Young. And then, later on we find out about his trainer and everything else, and all that transpired. So I don't know, Kev. I think it's just there are some writers that are just willing to turn a blind eye and look at the stats and say, based on the stats, they should get in.
Yeah, no, those issues are so difficult for people. And what ends up happening is whenever there's a turnover, you see this in everyday life in the court system. It just depends on who's sitting in the seats of authority and power. So, you have the group that was with covering the game at the time when those was prevalent, and all of a sudden we've had changing of the guard, and there are a lot of people that just want to look at it, just look at the facts and see the facts differently. So, yeah. And with regard to the CBA, one thing I've learned through the years is, you got to have a deadline. I don't care when it comes to negotiations. I don't care what you're negotiating. Until you see the last day that it can happen, it's not going to get done till then.
Yeah, and going back to the Hall of Fame, I mean, what you were talking about, Russ, is out there, but there were indications out there that I was reading from, I think it was Pete Abraham, who's a Boston Globe writer, who's saying that right now, based on what the tally that they have, nobody's going to get to 75%. So this is a year where Clemens, Bonds, Schilling, Sosa, they all go to the Veterans Committee, and the guys who we think have chances to, like Kent or Roland, they
and even Ortiz,
even Ortiz, and that's the one that really irks me, Kev, because we know it's highly suspected that he's a steroid cheat, but because he's nice and because he's Big Papi, he's gonna get through. Which it's okay. If you're gonna do that, then do that for A-Rod and Clemens and Bond. They're all in the same group. But my point is, right now, the Veterans Committee is death for those guys. They will never vote them in. Now they'll have to wait for like the current group of the Veterans Committee to die off and younger people to get in before they let Bonds and Clemens in. And I'm in favor of that. I think, let them suffer for 20.
You're in favor of the Veterans Committee dying off?
No.
I know. I'm kidding.
Shut up.
Well, he might be.
One other note, the Bills and New England will play on Saturday night in Buffalo, and the talk is for that game, middle of January. Of course, it's going to be like around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Luckily, it won't be very windy, because I think you'd have about 75,000 dead people in Orchard Park. But I don't know. Do you consider it like sort of romantic, Kev?
I do. Yeah. I feel bad about it, but I do love the cold and the snowy conditions. And yeah, I do. People have said to me, "Are you crazy? People are going to get frostbite." But I think back, and I think it has everything to do with when I was a kid and watching, the frozen tundra and Lombardi not allowing gloves, the linemen to wear gloves, and It was such I was so young that to me it just seemed romantic. And then we'd go outside in the freezing cold and play football in the snow because we wanted to sort of relive what they went through. I mean, it was just, but I like bad conditions for football.
I mean, all I know is I remember that who was it? John Facenda used to the frozen tundra.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I went to a game like that, Mike. Like it was what was the year that the Bears played New England? 85?
86, 85?
86. 85 or 86. I think it was 85.
85, yeah.
And so I went to the game, Jets, New England. So Tony Eason against Ken O'Brien. I want to say it was like 10 degrees or less. I wore after ski boots, like a snorkel. And back in those days, you didn't get instant replay at the place. So at the field. So I brought a Sony Watchman. I just bought it, got it for the holidays, whatever. And that was new and had like a 6-7 inch black and white screen. So I could watch the replays that they would show on local TV. That thing started to freeze around the edges. It had frost on it. That's how cold it was. But I lived through it. And like Kevin says, it's like a badge of courage.
Yeah, no, and I went to some games at Tiger Stadium in the 60s, football games that were just, bitter cold, and, it was part of it. And then, you'd look to see on Monday night, if you went to those games on Sunday, the Monday night halftime show, because they'd always kind of show if it was cold, you'd see people all huddled up, and you kind of like, well, will I be on the Monday Night Football because I was all huddled up? It was so cold, but it was part of it. No doubt about it.
Yeah, all I know about frozen tundra is like like you were saying, Kev, we would go out and we would play, touch football on the frozen grass, and getting tackled on that thing was like getting tackled on concrete. No
touch football. Like I'd never even heard of touch football until we always, when we were kids, you played tackle football.
We only played touch in the street.
Yeah,
that's the field. It was tackle.
Yeah, it was always tackle football. And to be honest, all the way through college, we used to get together when we were in college, a bunch of us on Sunday afternoons, and play tackle football. I mean, like, we were insane. Like now when I think back about it, if someone, if there were a bunch of 20-year-olds who were doing that, I'd say to them, you guys were idiots.
Oh yeah, it was dumb. That was dumb.
Yeah, it was silly what we used to do. So
all right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, January 12th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with the unfolding Evander Kane situation, Kev. Right now, based on things that have come out from numerous people, it seems that the Edmonton Oilers are in the lead for the free agent forward. There have been some indications that the two Florida teams are interested. I know that we talked to Joe Reardon yesterday, and he thought maybe Vegas would be possibly in there because of his potential low salary and his friendship with Robin Lehner and Jack Eichel. But everything seems to point to Edmonton. But we just saw a series of tweets from Elliot Friedman saying that the NHL has notified teams that they're investigating Kane crossing the border from the U.S. into Canada on December 29th. He tested positive for COVID on the 21st, flew to Vancouver on the 29th. And in the termination notice from San Jose, it was alleged that he didn't have proper medical clearance. The NHL is now doing a full investigation. This will likely prevent Kane signing in the short term as teams await the results. So now, so everything right now based on that is on hold. The question I have, and this is something that the arbitrator will determine. I believe in between the 21st and the 29th was when the NHL mimicked the CDC in regards to the 10-day to 5-day quarantine policy for COVID. I think I'm right on that. If that's the case, that might be part of Kane's defense. Well, if I've already been in
there. But weren't the players who were part of that, didn't they have to go the full 10 days? Like I seem to recall that.
Yeah. It was whether they were asymptomatic or not. That was they were asymptomatic, then 5 days would apply. So what have you heard about the situation in terms of Edmonton, in terms of the whole thing?
Well, I thought prior to yesterday, when it suddenly became Edmonton's game to lose, I thought the front runner, to be honest, was the Tampa Bay Lightning. I had talked to a general manager, and I had asked him whether he was in, and he said, no, we've decided we're out. And I said, do you know who's going to win? He goes, I think it's going to be the Lightning. Are going to get him, but it certainly all changed by yesterday evening. Everybody was saying, "Oh yeah, and I think it has everything to do with where Evander Kane wants to go, and it isn't solely about who can win the cup, as it might be for some. I think he just has more comfort going out and playing in Canada. But it is interesting, the investigation. This could really be horrible for Evander Kane, because they could suspend him again for what he did in all this. And what I find remarkable about this is here he is grieving to keep his contract, and yet there's ongoing talks as if he's already lost.
Right.
And I talked to an agent about this too, and he said too that it is a little bit kind of odd how this is kind of all played out, and it's almost as if he's willing to accept that he doesn't have a contract.
Well,
so I don't know. I didn't get it.
Chris Johnston yesterday on TSN talked about because they've established who the arbitrator is going to be. He's going to hear both sides, and he says, well, the possibility is they will uphold the contract, or they'll say that San Jose was valid had a valid point in terminating it. And one of the scenarios he laid out was that they could that he's free to sign as a free agent this year with anybody, like he's trying to do right now. And that if the arbitrator finds that they were not able to buy out or not able to terminate his contract, that next year he would resort back to San Jose, that San Jose would have he'd be back on the Sharks and have 3 years remaining on his contract, which is bizarre. It's like he's being rented someplace for the rest of the year at a low salary, and then he can go, and then San Jose is going to have to buy out his contract or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. And all of this has been odd because and I had to think this through, and I sort of get the logic of it now. But there's rules against you can't renegotiate a contract.
Right.
Yet you've heard, okay, well there could be a discussion about cutting a deal between the Sharks and the deal. Well, that would seem to be against the rules of renegotiating a contract. But I guess you're not really. I guess what you're negotiating in that case, this is how I solved it in my own head. I could be totally wrong on this.
Is a termination settlement? Is that
right? Like that he is going to agree that he's terminating the contract. He's agreeing to go along with it, but he wants something for being able to do that. I guess otherwise I don't understand how that fits within the rules of. You can't renegotiate a
Russ. It's almost like negotiating a severance package, like I did when I was working in banking. It's like I had a certain amount of years and I got a certain amount of a severance package. But in this instance, if they settle, if they don't go to the arbitrator, like every salary arbitration we know never goes to the arbitrator. It is always settled beforehand. Maybe in the end, that's what's going to happen here.
Well, I don't think so, because I think they're not going to settle, because if you look at CDC guidelines and you look at certain states, what they require from employees, whether it's a private business or a public business, like I'll read right from the CDC, employers should not return to work until they meet the criteria to discontinue home isolation and have consulted with a healthcare provider. If he doesn't have a record of somebody clearing him of not having COVID or saying your isolation was good, your check or everything else, he doesn't have a leg to stand on.
Then he may have abrogated a particular clause in the contract.
Although I don't think that applies as much as, every employer can set their own standards. So I think,
but didn't the league set a standard?
They did. That's what I'm saying. But I think that's what what they'll be discussing, not what the CDC guidelines.
Well, they did talk about the AHL. When I first heard what they were talking about as far as getting rid of them, they mentioned that he broke the AHL's policy.
Right. Because
technically he was in with the AHL team.
Yeah, but he's being paid by an NHL team.
I know, but they did mention the AHL.
Yeah, I don't know. It's what happens is when you get involved in all the minute arguments of all this, it's really kind of hard, but to sort it all out. But
I will tell you this: if the league does find that he didn't isolate correctly and was on a flight and shouldn't have been, he's not going to get paid.
But the hilarious thing here is that it came out. I don't know if it was Daniel Milstein or if it was reports from a report from a particular reporter that Kane was looking to go to a quote contender. And if that's the case, then why is he going to Edmonton? Because right now they may be a contender for a playoff spot. They're not a contender for a Stanley Cup. Well, I can understand him, Kev, wanting to play with McDavid and Draisaitl, whereas if he goes to Tampa, he might be on the third line. I get that, but
yeah, but I think I'm not going to hold that against them. We got a lot of things that we can hold against them.
Exactly.
But you need to go play in Edmonton with Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. And, you probably can convince yourself, look, I can take them to another level because I had something they don't have. Although, he can't fix their goaltending or he can't give themselves another defenseman. The other point I wanted to bring up, too, I had this discussion. I've had some readers have been said, how does this make sense for Edmonton? Because it doesn't fix their goaltending or it doesn't fix their defense. But, for what he's going to sign for, you're just taking one player out and putting him in. Like, this doesn't alter what their ability. I mean, because they're really kind of hamstrung in their ability to go out and get one anyway. But
he can win a couple of games just with his talent.
But it's not so much as that is that you're going to take out $1 million player off your roster and add another $1 million player. That's all. That's all you're doing here. Like it's not costing you anything really.
But exactly. But he's $1 million player who would be worth $7 million because
correct. He's much better than $1 million. I mean, this is a great move for Edmonton.
Yeah.
Provided that you believe that he's not going to cause problems in your dressing room.
Right. It's a free roll of the dice. And if he does cause problems, then they can terminate his contract and there's no skin off their nose. But I wanted to ask you, Kev, about Ken Holland's press conference. We talked about it yesterday. I got the feeling from the people I saw from Edmonton media on social media, none of them were pleased because it's like, I'm not firing the coach. I'm not trading my first round pick. I'm not really doing anything. And they're like, they want something done. And and what he did say, and again, if I had $1 for every time he said, well, we were in first overall on December 1st, but it's not December 1st. It's January 12th.
Yeah. This is the way he has operated from the very beginning. It worked for him in Detroit. Now you can argue that the game has changed. It's evolved. Things are different now. And that's, kind of a fair argument. But from his perspective, he's always been careful. He's never fired anyone mid-season before. And I think he believes that the team is better than it's shown recently. And I think, he's trying to do it, kind of his way. Now, is he right to do that? I don't know. It looks to me like the players are waiting for something to happen here, and he's not doing it. But I think the biggest thing here is not so much firing a coach; it's to correct the goaltending, because I think that changes everything. Like if you went out and even if he just changes the people, I think it would give this team a lift.
It would. But he also did one very smart thing, Kev, and whether he was asked the question, because I didn't get to watch it live, or he just addressed it, when he talked about players getting second chances and he believes in it, now he's kind of like laid the foundation that if he does sign Kane, well, listen, we talked about this already. Like, it's like, you can't really come at me. You knew that I had spoken to his agent and you knew this was a possibility. And so he's laid that already. And I think that's smart because it does suppress what might, outrage might come when they do sign him.
Yeah, or if he signs someplace else, he can say, "Well, I tried. I was in on it. Yeah. I did the due diligence. I was willing to give him a second chance. He decided to go someplace else. I'm trying, but I'm under limitations because of the salary cap and whatever. I mean, there's no excuses. But I think yeah. So, Kev, a little bit of a surprise yesterday, the announcement that Nick Lidstrom is going to be the VP of Hockey Operations with Detroit. The thing that I found interesting that I heard was he's not coming to Detroit. He's going to stay in Sweden.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I was just a little disappointed in that just for this reason. Like, this is a real unique opportunity, and I'm glad that Russ is here because he's really good at these type situations. I tried to come up with an analogy. The Lidstrom and Yzerman are two of the top 3 players in Red Wings history. Mm-hmm. So imagine having a 1-2 managerial combination. The only thing I could think of is if Mario Lemieux and Crosby were the general manager and director of hockey ops or vice president. But in other sports, I mean, would this have been like DiMaggio and Mantle running the Yankees? I mean, this is incredible when you think about it. I mean, these are 2 incredibly great players.
All right, I got one.
What is it?
All right, this is going way back, but you'll know the names. When Bill Cook was the Rangers coach, Frank Boucher was the GM.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's good. I mean, that makes sense. But it's really remarkable. And there was an interesting quote yesterday, and no one seemed to latch onto it, but I find it remarkable is, either Mark Messier or Steve Yzerman were the greatest captain of their generation. You can argue on that all day, and there's really no right answer with it. But without a doubt, Yzerman was one of the most respected leaders in the NHL. And yet what he said yesterday is, when he made decisions, he leaned on Lidstrom for advice and wisdom. So I thought that was kind of remarkable that, you think of Steve just sort of because of who he was making that, but, he sought counsel from Lidstrom. And so now he's going to do it from the managerial. So my only thought about moving there is I thought he was going to move because Nick had said that maybe when his kids got older, he might move back to Michigan because people didn't realize, but Lidstrom and his wife had actually lived more in Michigan than they had in Sweden when they left. Because he had spent all his entire, he had played 2 decades, and they were ingrained here. But they did speak Swedish in the home unless there was a non-Swede in the room. So they were preparing to go back this whole time. So I thought he might come back and do that. And my argument for that is, if you want to really make your mark and become, Steve Yzerman's right-hand person, don't you kind of have to be here and be in the office? And I know
maybe he'll be there for certain things. Maybe he'll be there for the draft.
Well, he is going to be there for the draft, but it's not like you go in every day and you get in at 9:00 and you plop in the chair in Steve's office and the 2 of you start talking about, what do you think, Steve? What if we went out and got a stay-at-home defenseman? Those kinds of conversations where I think it would be better if he was there.
I can't disagree with you. But I can see where it would work too. Think about it, right? As an example, like when you're, and it's a different position, but still an important position. When you're like a director of amateur scouting, those guys are still on the road a ton.
Yeah.
And not in the office.
Well,
now, he's a VP, so I get it, but still, it's workable.
Let's just say this. I mean, what we're doing right now, they could be doing on Zoom every day. I mean, it's not the same as coming into the office.
There's a different kind of impact. I get what Kevin's saying.
Yeah, I just think the nuances of it, and basically that job is you're kind of creating your own job. Basically, Steve Yzerman said yesterday, I'm giving him a blank canvas and telling him whatever you kind of want to do with it, just sort of do it. So, could he just say, okay, I'm going to come in for a month and help Jeff Blashill get the power play squared away?
Right.
He has the power to do that. Now,
Sure.
Whether or not he would do it remains to be seen. But, he was one of the greatest power play performers ever. And, he just sort of redefined how you play the point. He's the guy that started banking shots off the wall. And,
but Kev, I did think of one instant thing that he was going to do, instantaneous, and that is he's probably talking to Simone Edmondson today.
Well, but he's been doing that anyway.
I know, but now he's in an official capacity. So
yeah. So it is going to work, and this is the 21st century. We can certainly all use Zoom and everything else. Yeah. I'm just saying, from when you're trying to kind of establish a hierarchy of, like, right now, I think it would be hard for him to supplant Chris Draper as the number 2 guy if he's not here, because Draper's going to be there, popping into Steve's office, kibitzing with him on a regular basis.
I will tell you something, Kev. You didn't get to hear this. When I was at the Fall Classic, there was a fan that wanted to take a picture with Steve Yzerman, and Draper's like, "Here, give me the phone. I'll take the picture." So he'll even take pictures.
Yeah, no. And I just think that, I think it would be better for the organization if Lidstrom was the number 2 guy, because he is very poised, and he's very thoughtful. He chews on everything before he acts, and I'm not sure you can do that.
Their international scouting, though, especially in Sweden, he could find free agents out there. He could find young players to draft out there. Like, there's a lot of value still.
Well, there is, but they already have a leg up there because of Håkan Andersson. So
right. But how old's Håkan Andersson? Yeah,
no, I agree with you. But you're right. I mean, he can expand, and that he's going to work with, all the European guys, and I think you'll see. They've had a pipeline for Swedish players, and I think that'll now continue.
I think it'll get better.
Yeah.
Well, and we know that Yzerman has sort of adopted the Ken Holland approach when it came to bringing in, like, he had Nil and he had Yzerman and he had a bunch of people as assistant GMs, and Elliot Friedman just said a few minutes ago on the radio that Pat Verbeek might be in the mix for Vancouver's GM job. So if that's the case, then bringing in a Lidstrom is just sort of adding to the group when somebody might be leaving. So I think that makes sense. And honestly, the more you can get quality people in there, the better.
Mm-hmm. And you're right about, he has adopted. Holland had the sort of kitchen cabinet approach where he had 6 guys that he brought in, then he listened to everyone, and then he made his decision. One person, well, that's the thing too I was going to bring up. Devellano's still part of all this. A lot of people don't realize that, but Jimmy D is. Don't forget, he drafted Steve Yzerman. They have a long relationship, so he's there, and I don't think he has as much power as he had in the past, but Steve listens to him, but Steve's his own guy. Like, anybody who knows Yzerman, that's why when he talks, he jokes around about it, about how he loves having a scouting staff, because if things go right, he can take all the credit. If they go wrong, he can just blame his scouting staff. He jokes about that, but the truth of the matter is, Steve Yzerman owns the first round. Like that nobody. I don't care if Steve Yzerman went and saw all these people play, and his scouting staff said, well, we should take Joe Smith, and he liked Mike Jones. He's taking Mike Jones.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, that's just his thing, and I'm not sure everybody.
Into the whole Hextall thing after this, Mike, going with that basis.
Oh yeah. No.
Yeah, but I think he's very confident in what he does, and from what I've heard, all these picks, these last 3 picks, where he took Sider, Lucas Raymond, and Edmondson. Now, maybe everybody was in agreement on it, but I've heard that Yzerman pretty much kind of established, at some point, these are my guys, and everybody said, we all like them. So,
well, this is a nice subtle transition to what Bobby Clark, the former Philadelphia Flyers general manager, said on a podcast a couple days ago. When I first heard this, Kev, I'm like, this is typical Bobby Clarke, because now Ron Hextall is in Pittsburgh, so now he's the enemy.
Yep.
And I didn't get this until I heard what Friedman said today, is that this is Clarke going to bat for Chuck Fletcher, because what he's saying is, what he's laying the groundwork for is the fault of the Flyers falling apart this year is all on Ron Hextall, because he drafted Nolan Patrick second overall instead of Miro Heiskanen and Cale Makar. And Russ and I and you were at that draft, and nobody in their right mind was not taking Nolan Patrick 1 or 2. So it's a load of crap.
Yeah, Bobby Clarke is a company man, as you laid out, and he's going to protect his own. I won't say who it was, but someone within the hockey community once said to me, Bobby Clarke would lie about the time of day, and if it suited his team's interest. And I think that's what we see here.
And what's interesting is, again, Chris Pryor did a lot of that drafting, right? It's not even Ron, but they tried to just blame Ron for overruling. But like you said, it's up to the GM sometimes to make an overruling. Now, what I brought up, Kev, is at the time that Hextall got there, their minor league system was bad. They needed players to get to the NHL quickly. And so they were looking at players with that lens. So based on some of the players they passed on were because they didn't think they could get to the NHL quickly, and they had to get some numbers up there soon within the year or two. And that is what the scouting staff was tasked with there. But again, now that Hextall's in Pittsburgh and he's having early success here, and Fletcher is having no success, that's where all this is coming from.
Well, and let's not forget that Patrick at that time looked like he was born to be a Flyer.
Absolutely.
Like the Flyers, have a long tradition of taking that style of player. And Hextall played within that system. I mean, it made sense for the Flyers to take him.
They did. But then there was all this other blaming, Patrick is from Brandon, and then they went and took Provorov. Now all of a sudden Provorov can't play. He's having a bad year. But nobody can have a bad year anymore if your team's doing poorly, because then everybody's like, well, you got to trade him. But guess what? Ivan Provorov makes $6.7 million for the next 4 or 5 years. They're not trading that contract because he plays over 20-something minutes a game. And even if he's not a number one, he's your number two, and you can't get that on the open market.
No. Yeah, and it's not like he's suddenly turned into a third pairing defenseman. No. And to be honest, there have been a lot of things wrong with Philadelphia this season. But to me, Ryan Ellis's injury has had just aggravating consequences.
Sure, that's number one. There's no question.
Because you've lost Ryan Ellis, and he was brought in to make Provorov better. So Provorov couldn't get better because he doesn't have Ryan Ellis.
Right, that's true.
Yeah, and Couturier's injury has killed him as well. Put more of an onus.
And fans are the ones that can't get Claude Giroux out of town quick enough are seeing what they're like without Claude Giroux.
Yeah.
For the first time.
Now, talking about some of the games last night, and first one I want to talk about because a lot of things have come out of this one. The Lightning and the Sabres last night. I mean, obviously the Lightning are the best team or one of the best 2 or 3 teams in the league. The Sabres, we know where the Sabres have, I think, overachieved based on the expectations of what many people, including myself, had. Well, that may be over with because they lost 6-1 last night, but in the loss, they lose 2 goaltenders in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Malcolm Subban, his backup. Luukkonen, who's had a history of injury problems, he missed an entire year most of a year with a hip flexor injury, it was a labrum, a hip surgery that took, I think, 4 or 5 months to come back from. He's out week to week with a lower body injury. Subban is out month to month, and he finished the game. So I don't know what that injury is, but it's they didn't specify. They had to sign Michael Hauser, who they signed last year when they had a lot of injury problems. Anderson's out. Tokarski is out with COVID. He's been out for like a couple months. Now their goaltending tandem, Russ, is the immortal Aaron Dell and Michael Hauser.
I posted something on Twitter recently when it was apparent to me, and we had talked about it on the show, that the Sabres were going to ride Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen no matter how many games he's played in his career. And I didn't think it was a good idea. I mentioned that, and especially if we're going to count the ECHL, in 2019, like that's the most games he's played in a long time, which is 33 games. It's not that many games, and he played only 10 of them in the AHL. So now the answer was, well, the AHL team's not as good, so he could play better with the NHL team, which is complete baloney because he's facing like 40 shots a game with the NHL team. And now the workload's way harder. It's a little more condensed than the AHL. And, you know, I'm not saying that's contributing to his injury, but I'm saying it's a way harder workload for a young goalie. And for people to write and fans to just say, yeah, leave him up there, you don't realize what that could do to him in the future. And so, of course, I was like the really unpopular guy on Twitter with that statement. The next game, we gave up like 4 goals, right, Mike? And this game, he gave up 2 goals on 9 shots in the first period. Like, there is a point where you have to send that young goalie down, especially if he's doing well, so he could take it, bring it back to the AHL, go on a run in the playoffs with the AHL team, have that experience, and then come back to the NHL next year. And now he may not get that chance.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the severity of the injury. He could be back in a month. He could be done for the year. We don't know. And they say week to week. It's very obscure. But Kevin, Russ and I were talking about Luukkonen, and we were looking at like the games that he played in Rochester and then called up to Buffalo, and he was he played a back-to-back in Buffalo. I mean, which is unheard of now. He played a block of games between the Rochester and Buffalo where he played maybe 12, 13 games in a row. I mean, he was the guy. It was almost like we got to see if this guy can handle the workload when he's had a history of injury problems. You don't do that with young goaltenders.
The only thing I would say in defense of that is that, goalies' mental makeup is kind of crucial to their success. And, they're not fragile guys, or they wouldn't be pro goalies.
Sure.
So I'm not going to blame him too much. You have to do what's best for your NHL team, and he was their most important guy. I mean, you can make the argument that perhaps that would hurt him long term, but I can't imagine like that. Those guys are pretty realistic about what's going on, and that they know that the team is not very good, and it's just their job to try to keep them competitive. So I'm not sure it'll ruin them, but.
No, I'm not saying it's going to ruin him, but I'm just saying now in the grand scheme of things, it's definitely going to upset him. Like his first World Juniors, he had a problem mentally. And I even had other people in hockey tell me the same thing. He got over that. Yeah. And he's been over that since. But again, if all of a sudden he were to get peppered, starts getting hurt, you never know if it could slip back to that. I worry about that.
But we see goalies all the time, but some of them prefer to get more shots during the game.
Roberto Luongo did. I know that.
Well, yeah, I've talked to
I don't think he's old enough to be in that position to say, yeah, I'm good with like 35, 40 shots a game, where he doesn't have that experience.
Well, I just think back, like a lot of people thought that what made Marty Brodeur great was he could be really good even if he only faced 20 shots, which he often did with the Devils. And, it required where, some like Hasek, he didn't like 19 shots. He preferred 40, he wanted to get into it, move around and do all that. So I don't know. I think we're going to have to wait and see about that. It's tough news for the Sabres. But when you start talking about games, I thought you were going to go to the game, which to me said a lot, which was Colorado-Nashville.
Oh yeah, no, that was the next one.
Yeah, that is, to me, that's so unbelievable. Like Nashville has got to be the biggest surprise in the league. Like
no question.
Colorado is a really good team. Like they had the best winning percentage in the West before that game. And the only reason we're not paying attention to them is because they've played fewer games. But a lot of people still think they're one of the teams to beat. And Nashville comes back. They win that game. And Saros, there's two co-MVPs. And one of them is not Matt Duchene, even though he's had a remarkable year. It's Saros and John Hines. Those are co-MVPs on the Predators because Hines has got everyone to buy in. on this being hard to play against, including Matt Duchene, which, I mean, that's the miracle of miracles that Duchene is playing on thing. But they're so hard to play against, and Jeanette is playing so well, and the other big guy whose name escapes me.
You're talking about
Karen?
Jakob Trenin?
Trenin,
Oh,
yeah.
Trenin, yeah. Trenin.
Yeah, those two guys have made a remarkable difference on that team. And Jeanette has played himself into Rookie of the Year consideration.
He's got 12 goals. I mean,
well, and he's so miserable to play against. He's so hard. I watch those games, and I just enjoy every shift he's on the ice.
Well, if there's
Luke Cunning's doing well too. I always liked him as a player, and he's 8th on the team in scoring. So yeah, they're getting contributors, and even Tolvanen's got some points too. He's got 5 goals.
If there's somebody else who deserves MVP consideration from that team, it's Roman Josi, because I think up until yesterday, or he was leading the team in scoring.
He still is. Yeah,
still is.
Well, he's a great player, and the other, and we've talked about him before, but the new Ryan Ellis is Carrier, who's 3rd in minutes played. He's a smaller defenseman, but he gets things done defensively and offensively. They don't miss Ryan Ellis at all, and Ryan Ellis is a good hockey player.
Yes, he is.
They don't miss him, and this is a really fascinating team, and Saros has been brilliant. He deserves Vezina consideration at this point in the season.
Every goaltender around 6 foot or shorter, Russ, is rooting for UC Saros to be in contention for the Vezina, because that'll open up the market.
I don't think it will. I think they'll say he's the outlier, honestly.
Yeah, right. That might be the case, but it will give license for them giving some of these shorter goalies a second chance, maybe. Now the Atlantic Division is just really interesting. Like I said, the Lightning, Kucherov scored a couple goals in the game against the Sabres. They get the win. The Panthers maintain pace. They beat the Canucks 5-2. The Leafs win.
Are we going to talk about the rapper, or are we going to leave that alone?
Oh, well, I'll just say this, because there was increased if for people who don't know, what was his name? Russ Kodak something?
Kodak Black.
Okay. So being a fat 50-something white guy, I don't know hip hop.
Me neither.
So this guy was at the Panthers game, and he was introduced. He was on the scoreboard. He was in a private box next to either management or ownership of the Panthers. And then during a TV timeout, he was essentially, it's found out that he was not having sex with the girl. He was twerking some girl that was in the box with him, and it was on the scoreboard, and it was rather at that moment when they thought it was not twerking, when they thought it was a sexual act, there was a little bit of an embarrassment there, because he was invited to the game. It wasn't like he
was next to the GM box.
Right.
So Luongo's in there, Zito's in there. But I'll tell you the cautionary tale for this one. If you don't have a lot of fans in the stands and you don't have ushers everywhere, it could happen again.
Well, and the point, okay, this is the point.
I didn't see one usher. Did you, Mike?
No.
It was an empty section.
Well, it was in the second level, Russ, which is the where they like, I know in Buffalo, that's where they have they have people who will go and get you your chicken fingers and bring them to you instead of you having to go into the concession stand. I'm just saying that it's a little bit embarrassing, and I think that the NHL is always trying to appear, Kev, as they're cool, they're with it, like the NBA, and they will gravitate and grab onto anybody who makes them look cool, and it's almost like they do that at the risk of being embarrassed, and this was embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, they don't. Yeah, but you're right.
I don't know what to say about it. It's just
I think you're right. They do work, try to work too hard to try to, be hip and have all the stars. Like when you look at their roster for when they do the awards and the people they try to bring in to make it look how cool we are.
Yeah, we got Snoop Dogg. You pay Snoop Dogg and he'll show up. It's not like he likes.
Yeah, but Snoop Dogg is a Kings fan. He's a pretty big.
He is
right, but I don't know if he'd be at the All-Star. Well, he'd be at the All-Star game because it's in Vegas. But I don't know if he'd be at the All-Star game unless they're giving him his appearance fee. Let's just say that. But getting back to the Atlantic, so the Panthers beat the Canucks, the Lightning beat the Sabres, and Russ and I don't know how much you watch, Russ. I stayed up to watch the whole
period
thing.
and a half. Maybe I lasted 2.
Great. So the Leafs for the second game in a row against a quality Western Conference foe go up early.
Excuse me.
Yes. Okay. You okay there, Russ?
Yeah. I was just coughing up something. Like
against a quality Western Conference foe, like they did against Colorado. They were up 4-1 in the second period against Vegas. They were up 3-1 going in the third. That lead evaporated. They held on, went to overtime, and went to the shootout. It was basically like me being in the shootout. Nobody could score, and then finally William Nylander scored the winner, and the Leafs won 4-3. So the point I'm making here, Kev, is you've got this higher echelon in the Atlantic, and they seem to be separating themselves. And we talked about it yesterday with Joe Yerdon. If you look at the standings, you've got them in the Atlantic. You've got the top 3 in the Metro. You've got Pittsburgh or whoever. I think it's still Pittsburgh in the first wild card spot, and they're as good as anybody. And then Boston with a bunch of games in hand, now at 40 points. Only Detroit is within shouting distance of their teams.
And they're really not a factor.
And they're really not.
They can't, play on the road. So I mean, what you're saying is the playoff spots are settled in the East.
Right.
I think all but one. I'm still going to say there's a chance that if Boston were to have a hiccup, maybe somebody gets close to them, but that's it.
I doubt. Yeah.
But Russ, if Boston had played 34, 35, 36 games, I would say, yeah, it's still a race. They played 32.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
They have 5.
No, otherwise it is. It's pretty much sewn up.
Yeah, I mean, really, the Red Wings for a while were a placeholder for the Bruins until they played enough games. Because the Red Wings have played better than expected. But you can't. They've won 4 games on the road. They just can't do it. They've now lost 6 in a row and 10 of their last 11 on the road. So you can't make the playoffs in this league by playing that poorly on the road.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh won 4-1 yesterday over Anaheim. Evgeny Malkin comes back, Kev, and I'm like, you know what? They're flying under the radar. Everybody's looking at Tampa and Florida and Toronto and the Rangers and Pittsburgh. I think they had won 9 in a row until they lost to Dallas, and now they get Malkin back, and and Crosby is back, and they're
still the Penguins. Like I keep telling people that, like, why you have to treat them as if they're real is the fact that they have a long history, and they still have Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and this year their goaltending has been good. Russ keeps pointing out how hard they work, and there's probably a lot to that.
That's the reason I picked them for the playoffs, Kev. If I wasn't in a place where I could have seen them practice and see some of the other guys they had brought into camp, I wouldn't have picked them for the playoffs. I admit that. But I did see it every day, and I was like, you know what? This is different from what I'm seeing in Philadelphia. That's basically.
Well, and as long as Jari holds up, like, you've got to give them a shot. Just because, Crosby and Malkin still, when you're that good up the middle, you've got a shot in the postseason, and Letang is still playing, and I saw some stat about how many points he's had in his last 80 games, and it's like way up there. Like, he's still playing at a high level. So so they've been a real impressive team, and Mike Sullivan is a terrific coach.
He's impressing me now. This is the hard work, man.
Yeah, he always gets a lot out of his players, and he's not easy. I'll tell the story, and when I do, a lot of people are kind of shocked by this, but I've talked to people who had Tortorella as head coach and Mike Sullivan as assistant, and they said Mike Sullivan was the harder of the two coaches to deal with. Mike's not easy. He's on you all the time. And but he gets it to work, and I know Sidney Crosby appreciates what Sullivan does for that team, and so yeah, I think it's kind of set in the East. We know who the teams are, and I know X trying to get the Islanders back into it, but it sure doesn't look like it. So it would have to be it's over, says Mike.
Yeah. I have it ready and waiting every time we make it. This is gonna be the thing when the Islanders come up.
Yeah, it's like the video with Dennis Green. We know we are who they thought we are, or whatever.
But just think though. Whoever is the right now, and it could change because if Pittsburgh goes on a winning streak, that they could be in the top 3. But right now, if you're the team that wins the division, that you're second in points, say Tampa Bay or Florida win the Atlantic and they have 50 or whatever, they have 100 and something points, and they play the second wild card, and the team that wins the Metro gets the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round. I'd almost not want to, to play like Washington or the Rangers than to play Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. Well, there's, we always talk about parity in the league, but the parity in those divisions is pretty remarkable right now. When you've got, especially in the Atlantic, I mean, Boston hasn't kept up to the top 3, but I think if they had played all their games, I think they would.
Yeah, they probably would.
They'd be up there, and
they have 6 games in hand on Tampa. They have 4 games in hand on Florida. They only have 2 on Toronto. So it's going to be a very interesting race. And
I'll tell you what I want to bring this up before we go. Carolina. I was looking at that team the last week. They had 2 games with a total 13 goals, and Sebastian Aho had 1 point, and they scored 13. And I think, to me, what that showed to me is they are a lot deeper. Yeah. They got a couple of really good lines, but that's a pretty deep team there. They get scoring up and down their lineup, and their defense is really good. And Freddie Anderson has been good. And now is the time when all the Leaf fans send me a text or an email saying, wait till the playoffs. But we're not there yet.
Is Russ Cohen not sending you a message? No,
yeah.
But the interesting thing, and just because I want to talk about the KHL and the Central Scouting mid season rankings, but the interesting thing was that Elliot Friedman said was that this pursuit of Chychrun, that any name that's prominent out there, think of 2 teams being in on them. Carolina and Colorado. And if you think, can you imagine Colorado or Carolina adding Chychrun before the deadline? Now they have the assets, they have the young players to be able to pull that off. And if you bring in a guy who's a legitimate top 4 defenseman like Chychrun, that could shift the balance, Kev. That really could.
Yeah, and I'm going to repeat what I said the other day. People who scoffed at the idea that he should bring a Jack Eichel, return, just aren't paying attention to this. He is an attractive player because he's got this year and 3 more at 4.6.
Yep.
He's a potential top pairing. He is a muscular defenseman. Yes. He's got 18 goals last year. He's played for a really poor team, and he's 23 years old.
Yeah.
Like, this is a very attractive player. I talked to a GM yesterday who is, hopes he's in on it. The only thing he said is they don't want just good prospects. They want your best.
Yeah.
And
so if it's Colorado, they're gonna want Newhook, or they're gonna want Byram probably, and if it's Carolina, they're probably gonna want Neckish, and
like I just wrote yesterday, the Red Wings want him as well, and because they're looking to bring in what I would refer to as a middle-aged defenseman.
Yeah.
They want someone in the mid-20s because. That's the other thing. We compared Yzerman to Holland because he does a lot of things. He's very patient, poised, and everything. Here's the one difference, though. Edmondson, I'm pretty sure, is going to play in the Red Wings next year. Yeah. And I think if it was Holland, he'd have them already have a ticket and an apartment for him in Grand Rapids.
Right.
Now, Steve says, things like, you got to earn your way on this team. And I think he believes all that. But I think they're very excited about Edmonton. They've already got visions of Edmonton and cider dancing in their heads.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
About next season. So, but here's the problem. And, I wrote they're disadvantaged because their prospects are so good. Like they can't give up Cider or Lucas Raymond or Edmonton. There's just no way. And they can't give up their first round pick. You can't be in the middle of a rebuild. See, all these other teams are all real big contenders. Their picks are late in the first round. They can give up their first round picks. It's no big deal. Right. It is a big deal for the Red Wings. So, that's what I said to the fans of Detroit. They're just at a disadvantage. They can't give up those items, and they're going to try to, convince them to take Zadina or, Berggren or, So, it's just not going to work. So
now, Russ, I know this morning you had reported, and then it broke after that the KHL was going to suspend play. Now, I saw conflicting reports.
And Avis did too. Let's give Avis credit too.
Yeah, Avis Kellen's former hockey buzzer.
We actually posted when they did shut it down at the same time. The funny thing is I even said to my wife after I got the information, is tomorrow today? Like that I'm getting this information from Russia? That was the part I couldn't figure out, and clearly it was.
But then now the thing is that I think both of you said that they were going to suspend play for a week, and then I saw a Slava Malmud report that it's indefinite, which I find hard to believe because
I don't think it's indefinite. I mean, I can't say for sure, but I don't think it's indefinite. I think it's
indefinite means we don't know exactly when it's going to end. So it's probably correct. It is indefinite. So it might be 8 days, but it's not going to be a month.
That's fair. Yeah, that's totally fair.
But I fold this in, Kev, with what's the reports that just came out of China in the last couple of days, where they're shutting down everything because of Omicron in China, and there's another virus that's spreading there, and there's now there are starting to be some inklings of, well, maybe they'll postpone the Beijing. I can't see them postponing the Olympics this late in the game. So I don't know whether the KHL thing is let's get all of our players healthy before we send them over to Beijing. I don't know.
It's only a little bit of that. I got some real good information here not really out there. So, all right. So like I did report on Twitter, it's for people on the show that don't know, it's 126 players, but what they left out were the personnel, and that makes it like 177. So that's something that's kind of interesting. Early on, Salvat had a couple of positive tests, and then I guess they got a few more, but they were tagged with a loss. And that created a lot of hard feelings, and then teams started to get hard feelings against Morozov, who's the president. So I'm not going to say his job's in trouble, but, you know how, Russian things work, and you know how it works in the KHL.
Yeah.
He could be in trouble. Siska was, like, at first not even testing. Then they found they had some problems, and they weren't even making those tests available for a while, like the results. They were not being transparent for a little while. And then there's other teams that wanted to do what Mike would always say is just soldier on, because they feel like now with the other teams missing players, they could get points. So there's a lot of things going on right now in the KHL before the Olympic break. And I think what they are trying to do is get it under control as much as they can before the Olympic break. But the problem is they don't have a great testing system, because not every team is on the same page like a league like the NHL. So I think we could learn from that.
And they're also I mean, they're not on Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. The Russians had their own vaccine, and there's questions of how effective it is. So I don't know whether these, whether they imported vaccines from the West or if
I'm not sure, but some teams don't even test daily there.
Right. So, we'll sort of follow.
Well, that leads into a thought too. Like we may not have seen the worst of our COVID situation.
That's true.
Did I hear that Barry Trotz is down again?
Yes, Barry Trotz.
Well,
and the amount of games postponed are over 105.
Yeah. Well, I just saw in the news this morning they were discussing about the number of positive cases in San Francisco, which is a well-vaccinated area, and the positive rate there is like 40%. And again, you hear people saying, it's almost inevitable that if you go outside, you're going to get it.
Yep.
That the only way to avoid it is to really kind of segregate yourself. And the problem you still have with it is, it's not likely that, NHL athletes who are in their 20s are going to get all that sick because they're really healthy individuals. But you still don't know. Two of my kids, my son-in-law and my son, both had it last week. One had very mild symptoms. The other was very sick. Not go to the hospital sick, but, for 3 or 4 days, you don't want to be this sick,
Yeah.
And
as far as the players go in the KHL, it was a similar thing to the NHL. They didn't have any big sicknesses.
No.
Most players were asymptomatic. But again, you don't know about the personnel, right? And that's
with the coaches, what we've seen in the NHL, they've had a harder time. And I know that players have brought up that, and I've read and I've also heard from, they're concerned about what they're taking home, because some of them have immunocompromised children. Some of them have parents that are with them who have issues, and so
the kids have gotten COVID. I've seen that on Instagram recently from players who had it, have their kids have it. Yeah,
and it's there's a lot of hospitals. So we still could see another wave of this, and everybody just needs to be patient, and I'm sure everybody's trying the best they can to sort it all out. But I still believe we're going to get 82 games in, because I think they feel like they got to have 82 games.
Yeah, so. And I can't remember where I heard it, but it was from an authoritative source that the sort of adjusted provisional schedules had been sent to the NHL teams. They haven't been released to the public yet, to reschedule the games that have been postponed. Like with Toronto, I think it's 8 or 9 games. The interesting thing, and I'd like to see what the solution to this will be, is teams that didn't miss any games. Say, for example, Tampa. What are they going to be? Are they going to be just dormant for 3 weeks when they may have to move games that were scheduled for later in the season?
They might move a few just to kind of keep them going. Yeah,
right. I mean, they have to. They can't be just not playing for 3 weeks. I mean, I'm sure they'd enjoy it because that'll be a nice vacation, and then they'll be all juiced up for the for the stretch run and for the playoffs. But I don't.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, Mike, what the GM keeps telling me every time I bring up these type of things. Kevin, you keep talking in terms of the way we usually do things. We're doing things differently now because there's COVID here. Yes, so we can't do the things we normally did. So maybe they will sit dormant for 3 weeks.
Yeah, maybe.
So.
And the last thing, the mid-season rankings from NHL Central Scouting came out. Russ, I'll just read off. Everybody knows Shane Wright is currently ranked as the number 1 prospect. Logan Cooley is second.
You're reading the North American list, right?
No, this is let's just see. No, it's not. No, well, let's see. Savoy is third.
Okay. Those are still all North American, yeah.
Connor Geeky is fourth, and Pavel Mintukov. Playing for Saginaw, but he's from Moscow. So that must be the North American rankings. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my only difference is I still have Savoy ahead of Cooley, and I'm bullish on Cooley, but I have Savoy second. I haven't put Cooley second yet because I want to see more. I would think they would want to see more too, because we didn't get to see him in the World Juniors. I liked what I saw in camp. I liked what I saw before that. He said to me he didn't have the greatest fall classic. I agree, but I still saw things I liked. But I still want to see him in the All-American Prospects game on Monday. I don't know. Will he be in that game? I don't know. I have to look at the rosters. But I do want to see more of him. So that's the whole thing with that. As far as overall,
I'll give you the
guy that I'm going to be dropping. But
I'll give you the top 5 international here.
Yeah.
Joachim Kemel, Juraj Slavkovsky.
Yep.
Danila Yurov, Dave Juracek, and Brad Lambert.
Well, I can tell you for me, Lambert is at 7, and he still might rise for me. He did look good for what we saw in the friendlies and before the World Junior. Well, in the World Juniors, a little bit of it. Slatkovsky, I have sixth. I really like him. I think he's going to stay there. Yurov's going to be going up for me, and Miroshchenko is going to be going down. Miroshchenko is going to go down because I was told Bob Hartley isn't playing him until he's playing the right way. So again, Hartley is an old school guy, and he wants his kid to play a complete game. And like a lot of young Russian scorers, he's not right now. And so that is something where I've got to keep an eye on that now, because that will affect how I rank him, because I do look at, guys' maturity. And I was told, like, as an example, he's not mature as Chinnikov was.
Okay.
And so that's why Hartley played Chinnikov. So I have to look at those things. And, as far as his offensive play, it's great. He's the best European offensive player there. Kamel, I'm differing from that list. I have him 15. I know he can come up on my list, but I didn't see all the same things that a lot of other people are seeing. So I could be dead wrong, but I don't have him that high. But the other guys you mentioned are there. I do have Leka Ramaki. I probably just butchered his name, from Jew Gardens, but I have him 9th. And I don't know where Central Scouting has him.
Yeah, this is only a top 10 list, and he's not on the top 10.
He's not in their top 10. So, we differ a little bit. So it's early. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Great show, guys. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Lucello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.